Hello friends, and welcome back to the podcast, described in the first episode as being by a man who looks like he should be eating prison food and not crying listening to a live version of Tears and Rain he's just discovered. My name's Simon, I collect James Blunt, and this is episode 2 of Simon Collects Blunt, a closer look at James's first ever single, High. Back in 2004, on the 11th of October, the wonderful Back to Bedlam was released here in the UK. And just to be consistent, it was the one with the grey cover, and not the more famous blue cover. But there's much more to come about that in later episodes when we look at Back to Bedlam. James was newly signed, so relatively unknown to those outside of the music industry. There was no guarantee of success, no public momentum, which does always help. And it was in not so many words just a label taking a chance on a softly sung, emotionally open songwriter, but as we know their chance paid off in the end multiple times. Some 7 days later, after the release of Back to Bedlam, on the 18th of October 2004 to be precise, James dipped his toe into the freezing cold water of a single release, and thus his first single, High, was born. The first single, I'm not ashamed to say, was one which really didn't get going until it was re-released as the 4th single from Back to Bedlam. In its original 2004 release, however, High failed to break into the UK top 75. It actually charted at number 148, and it disappeared quickly. There was little radio rotation, if any, limited press, and no sense at the time that this song, possibly even this artist, would become a global name. They were of course very wrong, but for most debut artists this can be where the story ends. But thankfully not here. Not for James Blunt. For the collectors amongst us, it's important to try and get an original CD single of High, purely because it's the first single from the man whose music we all love. I remember the first time I got my hands on the original High CD single, it felt like I had an absolute gem in my hands. The single itself, having only reached number 148 in the UK charts, was more than likely in fairly short supply. Copies can at times be hard to come by, but if you search on eBay or similar auction websites, then you can normally still get a copy, but they do become rarer and rarer as time goes by. Back in the day, I bought 4 copies of it because it seemed the best thing to do, and I'm really glad that I did. So on to the actual physical releases. The cover of the single was designed by Salvador Designs, who, if you check on their website, have worked with a huge number of music artists and companies. The photograph of James was taken by Steve Dovell, again someone who's worked with many music artists in his long and distinguished career. The song High was written by James and Ricky Ross. His name may not ring a bell, but it should. Ricky Ross is the lead singer of the British band Deacon Blue, a band who had great success with over 12 top 40 singles and number 1 albums to boot. High was the only song, as far as I know, that James and Ricky Ross wrote together. There may have been others that didn't make the cut, but we might never know. High was produced and mixed by Tom Rothrock, who would go on to work with James on numerous albums. James has spoken warmly about working with Tom. In an interview with Blog Critics, he said he really understands where I'm coming from when reflecting on their early partnership, and in a separate interview with Yamaha All Access, Blunt described Rothrock as a very gentle man and a great listener, who helped him find his sound without forcing ideas on him. Both these quotes relate to the time during the recording of Back to Bedlam. So finally onto what is actually classed as the first release from James Blunt as a single. On the top row, what I would class as the first ever pressing of a James Blunt single is the UK one-track promotional CD. The CD has a catalogue number of PRO 15197 and has a label code of LC00122. For those who don't know, a label code is an identification number used in Europe to show which record label released the CD. This code shows it was released by a Warner Music owned label, in this case it was Atlantic Records. The LC codes are assigned by the IFPI, the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry, and it's an industry ID more than anything. I'm told it helps with royalties, distribution and cataloguing the product. So now you know. Nothing like educating the masses about boring subjects. Things like that will occasionally happen on this podcast. On the reverse of the front inlay it lists the various details. We've mentioned some before: the track, the duration. The song was produced and mixed by Tom Rothrock and it was written by Blunt Ross. It mentions it was published by EMI Music Publishing Limited / Warner Chappell Music. Lists James Management as 21st Artists Limited. Photography by Steve Double, design by Salvador Design. It then ends with 4 lines of legal blurb which I won't bore you with, but needless to say, unauthorised copying, hiring, lending, public performance and broadcasting of this recording is prohibited, which is why even on this podcast I'm unable to play the music of Mr. Blunt to accompany these releases. As much as I'd like to, I don't have the money. The next version in the collection is the one below it. It's an Australian one-track promo CD, and having done so much research until I'm literally confusing myself, it appears the first Australian release of High had no impact in the charts whatsoever. There's no record of it being in the charts that I could see. In that respect, I feel quite blessed to have got my hands on any copies, let alone a promo release. The one-track Australian promo CD comes in a standard CD single case, with the artwork we discussed at the beginning that's been printed out and trimmed to size. There's nothing printed on the reverse of it. On the CD itself it features a catalogue number of WCD B636. We then have the first ever James Blunt CD single that was released to the public to purchase, and this release has 2 tracks, High, obviously, and Sugar Coated, a track written by James, Jimmy Hogarth and Sasha Scarbeck. The catalogue number for it is AT184CD, and if you're into barcodes, then it's 0756793333124. This CD was also available to purchase in the Netherlands, Germany, France, Switzerland, Austria, Italy, Belgium, but again in very small quantities, and it didn't chart anywhere across Europe, so much different to the later release. Underneath this is the Australian CD single that was available for the public to buy. I'm genuinely unsure of the release date for this. I've looked and guess what? Looked again and still cannot find a release date for it. If anyone can help, then please do. The contact details are at the end of this podcast. The Australians were lucky. They got 3 tracks compared to us Brits and Europeans who ended up with 2. The third track on this single is the acoustic version of High. The catalogue number for the release is 75679389692. If you add a 0 to the front and a 2 to the end of the catalogue number, you've got your barcode. I still collect James Blunt releases and scour the internet for anything I'm still looking for each and every day. Whilst looking at a website of a record shop in Melbourne, Australia, I stumbled upon a promotional CD with the radio edit of High issued by Warner Music Australia, a different promo CD to the one I'd mentioned, same cover, different edit of High and a different catalogue number. For the purists, this one is WCDB 944. I can only describe the feeling I felt finding this absolute gem of a promo CD that I did not know existed, as that of finding out that a loved one had won the lottery. I swear it affects my life collecting James Blunt releases, I really do. A bit of promotion for them because they gave me goosebumps finding this release that I didn't know existed. You can find them at 7 Wallace Avenue, Point Cook in Victoria, Australia. The name of the shop is Rare Records. And that, my friends, is it. That's the second episode coming to an end. The first single, High, came and went very, very quickly, but left behind a few collectibles which are definitely worth searching for and collecting, and nearly 22 years after it was released, it can still throw up a few surprises, like the radio edit Australian promo, which will give me sleepless nights until it safely arrives to the UK from Australia. Thanks for listening. If you've got this far, well done. To update those who asked, my injuries are still slowly healing, but never ever think that if you get crashed into by someone else who's charged with the offence of causing your injuries with their dangerous or reckless driving, that it's all plain sailing. It has and continues to be the most stressful time in my entire life, and in tough times in life we lean on certain things for support, and James Blunt must have bloody strong shoulders because I'm leaning on his music a lot each and every day, and I'm a heavy man. I post on Instagram. You can find me on @SimonCollectsBlunt, and I also have an account on that cesspit X, which I post to occasionally, @BluntCollector. Other than that, feel free to email me if you want to, simoncollectsblunt@gmail.com, See you all in a few weeks with episode number 3.